Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So, yeah, we have 3 hours, 3 hours to practice. Um, and so, yeah, like I said before, it'll all be review. I won't explain anything new that we haven't already talked about before. And I won't explain much, actually. I'll try not to talk too much. Um, so basically, we'll do meditations, like guided meditation on what, yeah, all things we've already been over. So if you think about like those what we covered in this module on the mind, then I think we started off talking about kind of in the context of why it's important to learn about the mind, study the mind, and looking at how we our desire for happiness and to be free from suffering, and how those are experiences that arise in the mind, and then looked at different types of happiness, like short term versus long term, kind of superficial versus deeply meaningful, and so forth. So that's one thing we'll look at first is just this kind of universal desire for happiness, and different varieties of happiness. And then we turn to like a definition of mind. What is the mind? The mind, that which is clear and knowing, and especially what does it mean for the mind to be clear? And then checking, in our own experience, is there really kind of a clear nature of mind that's just temporarily disturbed or obscured by mental afflictions that arise, or different, perceptions that arise and disappear? Is there some kind of more fundamental purity there that's continuing there or not? Um, so we look at the just nature of the mind as being clear and knowing in different ways. That's the second thing, and then the continuity of mind, right? How the mind arises, um, moment by moment, and is changing. And this Buddhist assertion that each moment of awareness of the mind has to arise from a previous moment of mind. And so that goes back in an infinite continuum back. Each of our streams of consciousness has an infinite kind of past. And then, so one way to look at that is to trace back. I mean, first we start in the present moment, and then seeing, is it really the case that each moment of conscious experience gives rise to a successive moment of conscious experience that's, slightly different in what it perceives, the way it engages an object. Um, and then can we trace that back, trace that stream of awareness back, and then to our earliest memories, and then imagine, then kind of pose the question, where did it come from? How did it begin? Where was there a beginning, or where did it come from in the moments before my earliest memories? And then, so looking at the past continuity of our awareness, and then looking at the future, imagining the future, right? We can't look at it because it's not something that's already existed, right? But we can imagine from this moment in the present, then, 1 second from now, 1 minute from now, a few days from now, and then years, and then up to our death and passing away from this life. And then ask the other question, what happens when we die? Does our stream of consciousness continue on? Of course, the Buddhist answer is yes, it continues on. I mean, yeah, yeah. So, I'm sorry, thinking about once we achieve liberation from samsara and then we die, then there's different Buddhist views about what happens with the stream of consciousness, right? Some say it ceases and some say it continues on. But for an ordinary person like us, as long as we haven't become arhats, or until we become arhats, then the different schools of Buddhism, their idea about what happens with the stream of consciousness is all the same, right? And yes, it does continue on through death into into a future existence, future rebirth. And so then imagining, well, does that seem accurate to oneself or not? Why or why not or how? So we look at the continuity of consciousness, looking at the past and the future. So third thing, and then what did we look at? Then I think we look at like disturbing emotions versus constructive emotions. I think that's what we did. I'll check my notes as we go, but um, looking at different afflictive states of mind that arise, and we especially looked at anger and attachment, and then antidotes to anger and attachment. So meditate on those. So that's roughly what we'll be meditating on in this 3 hours. And we'll divide the time up into three separate kind of sessions of 1 hour each, or a little less than 1 hour each, and have a short break between each. And then even within, like, so from now it's like 2:05. So we have about 55 minutes, but we'll even divide that time into a half. No, and I'll give you opportunity just to take a few minutes break. Yeah, because for when we're new to meditation, it's better to meditate for short periods of time, say 20 to 30 minutes, with the idea being that we can have a higher quality of attention for a short time, rather than sitting, trying to and kind of push ourselves to focus on the object of meditation for a long time. And then gradually we get tired and it becomes more and more difficult. And then we end up having a low quality of attention. And sitting with a very low, being distracted, like largely. That's not so helpful. It's better just to take a break and then resume and do another short session. Yeah. So as we go, I'll kind of suggest, how to focus, what to focus on. But of course, you're welcome, if other things come up strong in your mind that you feel like you need to reflect on, that's, fine. The way you use the time is, up to you. And then also I'll share my screen. So I'll base mainly the meditations in the homeworks I sent out each week. There was some meditation instruction at the end. So I'll share my screen and show those. Mainly I'll base the meditation on those. And then if there's any PowerPoint slides that may be useful, I might also share some of those as we go along. Okay. Any questions right at the outset about what we're doing? No? Okay. Yeah, should be all quite straightforward, I think. Okay, so let's just get comfortable in our meditation posture. And for those of you online, like, you don't have to, for this, you don't have to keep your screens on. If you prefer to turn your screen off, that's fine. Yeah. And actually, I'd request you, if you're going to be moving around a lot, it's better turn your screen off, because I have to leave my screen on, and then if I see a lot of movement on my screen, it's a bit distracting. I should say also, I'll give some opportunity for questions maybe at the end of each hour. If there's any questions. But I don't want to spend a lot of time like in question and answer kind of mode. Okay, so first let's just pay attention to our posture. Check how your body feels. Check that you're seated in a way that's comfortable. You're on the floor or in a chair or wherever. And remember, the main purpose of the meditation posture is so that we can sit still, quietly, for the duration of the meditation session, and also be alert and not be distracted by our body, so we can focus on our mind. Especially if you're seated cross-legged or sitting, upright in a chair, then it helps to find a place where you're balanced, where your torso, your spine are erect and balanced, so that you're not kind of drifting to the front or the back or left or right. So it can help kind of to rock backwards and forwards, find a point where you're balanced, and left and right the same. And then once you find a point where you're balanced, you should be able to kind of relax your shoulders, relax the muscles in your back, lower back, and your body just remains there without having to clench muscles or hold, in your abdomen or back or wherever, to hold yourself uh, too straight and rigid, right? Because we'll quickly tire of doing that. And then briefly scan through your body from the crown of your head down to the soles of your feet, bringing your attention briefly to each part of your body, checking for any tightness, discomfort, and releasing that, letting it all go. And then we should generate a positive motivation for the session. Outset. So remembering all the other people who have a mind, and just like us, our parents, partner, children, friends, family, and then countless other strangers, whom we, neighbors or peers at work or people we interact with day in and day out, and share this our lives with, share the world with, as well as all the animals, remembering how they all have a mind. Just like us, the nature of their mind is exactly the same as ours, and how they have challenges, difficulties, limitations, just like us, and suffering, just as we do. And yet they also have wisdom, potential for compassion, and potential for happiness and peace, just as we do. So then we can wish for ourselves and for all other sentient beings that whatever we do in this meditation session may become a cause for them to be free from dissatisfaction, obscuration, confusion in their minds, and have every form of well-being, happiness, up to enlightenment. So then let's begin by just simply observing our breath as a starting point. And it's something we can come back to again and again if we like. So just breathe naturally and be aware of all the sensations that accompany our breathing. Inhale, exhale. You can follow the breath down into our body and back out. And try to let go of all other distractions. And simply observe the breath with our full awareness, full attention for a few minutes. Mm. And then let's gradually turn our attention more to our mind. Right? So continue being aware of the breath, but then gradually shift more of your attention to observing the mind um, that's observing the breath. So remember the definition of mind is um, that which is clear and knowing. And remember in the Buddhist context, like mind, awareness, consciousness, those are all synonyms, talking about the same thing. So using, awareness of your breath as a kind of anchor for the meditation to keep, give you some um, I don't know, something a bit more concrete to give us what do you say, orientation. Then try to also be aware of the mind. So that's helpful because just observing our mind itself is a bit tricky, right? Because the one looking is the mind, and the thing being looked at is also our mind, right? And the mind itself, it doesn't have shape or color or texture. It's something very ephemeral in a way. But just practice trying to be aware of awareness itself, aware of your own mind and kind of the flow of the mind, whatever perceptions, thoughts, feelings arise, without getting caught up in mental chatter about any of those. Just observe awareness itself. Kind of, it's like looking at a mirror instead of focusing on the reflections in the mirror, trying to focus on the mirror itself. Instead of focusing on anything appearing to our mind, try to focus on the mind itself to which things appear. Mhm. Okay, so you can relax your attention now. We'll take a 3-minute break or so. So each break, I'll ring the bell at the beginning of the break and at the end of the break. So now we have a few minutes. So if you want to keep meditating, of course you can, but if you want to stand up, move around a bit just in silence, you're welcome to. So let's resume. So each time we take a break and then resume meditation, mostly we'll pick up where we left off from. Right? So try to return to that practice we were doing just before the break of being aware of our own awareness itself, of our mind. So then I'll share my screen now. You don't really have to look what's on the screen, but some of you might like to use it as a reference. But so then we'll turn to our attention to happiness, different kinds of happiness. Um, yeah, so in your own experience, look at different varieties of happiness, like pleasant kind of feelings of body, or especially of mind, from very short term, short lasting, like the pleasant, experiencing a delicious taste of food or something, or laughing at being kind of humored by a joke or something like that, to more, the whole range, very short term, kind of fairly superficial forms of pleasure and enjoyment, to that, but look at especially how they exist in our minds. They arise in our minds as an experience in the mind. They might arise in independence of or in relation to something external, like something someone says or does, or something we see or hear or smell, taste. But the basic experience of happiness, enjoyment, pleasure is in our minds. Is that true or not? We can look at check that. Does that really seem to be the case? And then look to more, deeper senses of joy and satisfaction that might come, with a sense of accomplishing something or completing some project, or deeply caring about someone else, or feeling loved and cared about by someone else, or just having a sense of meaning to our life, or deep sense of connection with another person. So compare these different varieties of happiness, well-being, enjoyment, or joy that we have, and recognize how they're all, aspects of our conscious experience. And especially, with the question in mind, do they really arise from from external things, or is it something that primarily arises from within oneself? So maybe to give a bit better structure to the meditation, I'd suggest, starting with the more superficial, short-term forms of pleasure and happiness. Look at those first for a while, primarily in one's own experience. And then gradually look at
more profound or deeper or longer lasting forms of happiness and satisfaction? Again, in your own experience. And then we can ask, through all these different varieties of happiness we experience, what is it, that's essentially the same about all of them, that we would include them as a form of happiness? So we're kind of from different angles, we can try to answer the question, like really, like what is happiness, by checking our own experience. Mm. And then another related question is like, where does happiness exist? Our own happiness for oneself. Is it something within us, in our mind, or something in our body, or something outside of us? Mm. And then finally, we can ask, like, to what degree is, the happiness we experience in our mind, to what degree is that dependent upon things outside of us, upon other people or places or things that appear to us from the outside? And to what degree is it dependent merely upon our own minds, how we use our own minds, what happens within our own minds, the thoughts and feelings that arise in our own minds? What primarily determines, you know, if we have happiness or not in our minds? Mm. So again, relax your attention. And this time we'll take a little longer break of 6 minutes. So we'll resume at 3:03. Mm. Okay, let's continue. Oh, I should ring the bell. My protocol. So yeah, let's once again focus our attention inwards. Um, and just be aware of our mind itself. Don't have to go too much into thinking about it, different forms of happiness again. Just be aware of the mind in the present moment. So now in this session, we'll look at the definition of the mind and check to see, what we think about that, if that seems accurate or not. And then look at we'll see, probably we'll get, well, in the second half of this. Anyway, first we'll just look at the definition, then we'll look at the continuity of the mind. So let's begin by just observing our mind in the present moment. And then recall that. So here I'll share my screen. So we'll recall the definition of the mind. That which is clear and knowing. It's the way the mind's defined, kind of described in Buddhism. So we check, so there's these two aspects. The clarity is like the nature of the mind, is to be clear. And we can use analogies to illustrate that, like space or the sky. So like the sky's nature is to be clear in the sense that, whatever obscures sort of the clarity of the sky, whether it's at night and allows us, the clear sky allows us to see the stars, infinite stars, or in the daytime, and the clear sky allows us to see kind of this vast blue expanse of the sky. And so the sky's nature is to be clear is by contrast with all the things that obscure being able to see the blue sky or being able to see the stars at night, being able to see a far distance. That all those things, whether it be smoke or dust or clouds, or even sunlight, sunlight obscures us from being able to see the stars, or moonlight. That all those things they're not fixed as part of the sky. They're not of the nature of the sky. Sometimes they're present, and sometimes they're not. Because if they were of the nature of the sky, then whenever the sky is present, they should also be present. You wouldn't be able to have, a sky without, like, for example, if the clouds were of the nature of the sky, then you wouldn't be able to have, the sky without clouds. They would always be there. Just like you can't have fire without heat, right? Because heat is of the nature of fire. So the idea that the mind's nature is to be clear, or the sky's nature is to be clear, is that nothing that appears, no object that appears to the mind is of the nature of the mind. Right? Different objects appear and pass away, just like nothing, no reflection that appears in a mirror is of the nature of the mirror, is fixed in the face of the mirror. Different reflections arise and then depart. So one way to meditate on this in relation to the mind is to observing our own minds. And yes, with every instance of, a different type of consciousness, an eye sense consciousness or ear sense consciousness, there's always something appearing, right? Even to our ear sense consciousness, as long as it's manifest in our continuum and functioning, it's like there's always some sound appearing. Even if we're in a very quiet place, then the inner ringing of our bodies kind of appears to the ears. There's like a ringing in the ears. It's kind of the sound of the energy in our bodies, something like that. So there's always something appearing like to the ear consciousness, and yet none of those sounds that appear is always present. Or is it? Right? We can check. And more significantly, in relation to our mental consciousness, which is what experiences thoughts, different thoughts and feelings and emotions. Is there any thought, feeling, emotion, idea, image, anything that appears to, especially our mental consciousness, that is of the nature of that consciousness or is always present? Or rather, is it that different perceptions, ideas, feelings, and so forth all are adventitious, they're temporary, they arise and pass away? So yeah, looking in that, first just let's focus on the clear nature of the mind. So we can use like the illustration of the sky, a mirror, water. So I also wanted to mention, just as you reflect, any of the meditations we're doing, also it's very good to draw on, any of the readings that we've done for this class or other reading you've done or other, ideas you've heard about, whatever seems relevant and informs your own contemplation in a different way. You're welcome to draw on all of those things. Okay, so for a few minutes, let's focus on the clear nature of the mind's nature, that it's clear. And check, does that seem true or not? Mm. And then let's shift our attention from the clear nature of the mind to the function of the mind, which is to know. So, in the definition, the mind is that which is clear and knowing. Clarity is the nature, and knowing is the function. So, then what does it mean to know something? Here, knowing doesn't mean like, like knowing a name, knowing an address. It's not like having information or having understanding of something. It's more fundamental than that, right? Because every instance of awareness, even like when we're like confusion, like not like that, like not remembering someone's name, even that mind, it knows something. It's aware of something, right? It's aware of us not being able to remember someone's name, or confusion, like thinking something, I don't know, like thinking uh, something's like a person is really worthless when actually they have great worth, or someone's, I don't know, very unkind when actually they can be quite kind, or something like that. So it's also, it's here, knowing means like aware, being aware of something, right? And it's really this function of mind, functioning to be aware, which is, in a way, it's unique to the mind. There's no other kind of thing that can be aware or know objects um, as a mind does, right? Or are there? We can check that. But yeah, try to focus on this in your own experience, this aspect of the mind, its function, to be aware and know, and just, yeah, try to recognize, get a sense of that. Look at that carefully. Try to, yeah, make it clear for yourself. Mm. One way to try to get a sense of this, the nature of the mind, its clarity and the function of the mind, its knowing, is to compare our minds to other objects. Like think about how other objects that exist, like a table, a chair, a building, trees, um, even like smartphones, computers, like do they have the ability to know or to know or be aware of themselves? Right. So it's said that the mind is the only thing that exists, or any person's mind, a mind is the only thing or type of thing that exists that can be aware of itself. There's no other object or type of object that can be aware of itself. So compare this nature of the mind, or the definition. It's clear, that which is clear and knowing. Does that really seem to be something totally unique to mind, an instance of your mind? Are those properties which no other object possesses, especially the knowing, the function of the mind to know? Mm. So finally, for a couple minutes, just summarize, your own understanding of the mind, like what a mind is. There's a clear knowing, that which is clear and knowing. I mean, of course, you might disagree with that definition, but yeah, whatever your understanding of what the mind is, then kind of summarize, distill that for yourself, and just again practice being aware of your own mind. So now we'll take a break again for 3 minutes. Uh, it's important to be comfortable. I used to have so much pain at the monastery when we have to sit in pujas, cross-legged, just in long. We just have long like cushions. We sit in rows, like knee to knee, cross-legged, and it's like it's a big no-no to put your feet out. You keep your feet folded like under. You shouldn't actually. People shouldn't see your feet or your hands. Mainly, you keep your hands under your robes. But sometimes you have to sit there for 3 hours or average an hour, but sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, sometimes like many sessions. And my legs used to hurt so badly. Oh man, so difficult. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Okay, we're already past our break time. Okay, so let's continue. Um, excuse me. So we'll pick off. We'll pick up from being, just being aware of our mind, the clear and knowing nature of our mind, and then we'll trace the continuity of our mind back into the past, and then come back to the present, and then imagine in the future. So starting in the present, first let's spend some time observing how, specifically in the present, how one moment of awareness gives rise to a successive moment of awareness, the next moment of awareness. I think let's start with, it's good to generally, when we're looking at something, um, it's good to start with the kind of coarser forms of that thing and then look at the more subtle forms, right? So with our mind, the coarser forms of mind are our sense consciousness. Um, and because, yeah, let's look at our ear sense consciousness, our experience. of sounds. So let's focus first on our ear sense consciousness, this one form of mind that we experience. Or you could also look at your body sense consciousness if you prefer. Doesn't really matter. But just bring your awareness to the present moment of ear sense consciousness or body sense consciousness. So an ear sense consciousness experiences only sounds, right? It doesn't experience tastes or smells. It doesn't see anything. It doesn't experience visual forms or colors. And also doesn't experience physical sensations like rough or smooth, hot or cold. It only experiences sounds, internal sounds in our body or external sounds from the environment around us. But so focusing on the ear sense consciousness, remember, we're not looking at the sounds, we're looking at that consciousness, the sense consciousness, which hears sounds. And then especially focus on how that consciousness, it arises from moment to moment. Each moment is different in that each moment it hears different sounds, right? Different sounds are perceived. And just as the sounds, arise in time, they arise and pass away. But the ear sense consciousness, as long as we're awake, it's continually present, right? So it exists through a continuum. And yet each moment is different from the preceding one and different from the successive one. So just in the present moment, observe how this awareness of sounds, um, how it kind of emerges continually in each moment. Mm. And then now let's shift our attention to our mental sense consciousness, which is primarily like aware of thoughts, feelings, imagination, memories. It's a bit more subtle than the than the ear, any of the sense consciousness, the ear, eye, nose, tongue, or body sense consciousness. And it also experiences the objects of all of those. So try to distinguish your mental consciousness or mental sense consciousness in the present moment. Right? Even the mind that thinks, now I'm going to try to focus on my mental consciousness itself is a mental consciousness, right? Our sense consciousness don't think like that. And then again, observe how that mental consciousness is arising, emerging in each moment through time. It's like each moment of mental consciousness is both an effect of the moment of mental consciousness that preceded it, and also a cause of the next moment of mental consciousness that arises, that is produced. So then let's trace back this continuum of consciousness, primarily mental consciousness, but also the other, five, sense consciousness. Let's trace back, So we've been looking at how they arise in the present moment. But let's turn our attention and trace this stream of consciousness. It's like an unbroken flow of a river back in time to just a few moments ago. And then moments before that, when we were looking at the ear sense consciousness. Moments before that, when we were having a break. And then back to, further this morning, when we awoke this morning, and then last night, and yesterday. So, like that, follow your own stream of consciousness back through time. Until gradually you reach your earliest memories in this life. So take a few minutes, to do that. There's no rush. Mm. So then, as you gradually reach back to your earliest memories in childhood, early childhood in this life, so then, form the question: well, where does where does the stream of consciousness come from in this life? How did it begin? Because this has to do with the fundamental question: does consciousness arise from the body and the brain, the nervous system? Does it come from something material, the cells, the molecules, and atoms that make up the body, or does it come from um, a previous moment of consciousness or something else? Right. So, of course, the Buddhist view is that each moment of mind comes from a previous moment of mind, but we want to check if that seems accurate or not. So, as you reach back to your earliest memories, then imagine seeing back before those, right? To when you were, like maybe a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, 6-month-old, and then even, at the time of your birth or when you were in your mother's womb, in those 9 months, all the way back to the moment of conception. So, at what point did our mind begin in this life? And how did it arise? From what did it arise? What came before that? So formulate your own picture of that for a few minutes. Mm. Yeah, so finally bring that kind of contemplation to a close, looking back at the past continuity of consciousness, especially kind of recognizing what seems more accurate, more reasonable in your own way of thinking. Those past, stream of consciousness seem to arise from the cells of the body and the brain and the nervous system. If so, like you have to like kind of have some picture of how does that work? Something physical becomes a mental experience and creates that. Or does each moment of mind, no matter back how far back we look, arise from a previous moment of mind? Of course, that's the Buddhist view. Or something else, right? Does it just arise from nothing? Or from kind of a universal consciousness? Then a new stream like spills out from that? Or created by a god, like a creator god? Anyway, conclude for yourself either, whatever understanding you have or whatever doubts that linger still. And then come back to the present moment. Jump back to the present moment. And then we'll briefly do the same with our imagination in the future. So now we have this present moment of experience. And imagine what we might experience a few seconds from now, minutes, hours, days, months, years. Kind of fast forward for the rest of our life, imagining. And then right up to the time of our death, right? And then kind of picture a scene of your death and briefly imagine the experience of dying, meaning the body ceases to function for whatever reasons, and the brain, so that when the heart stops to beat, blood stops to flow to the brain. Then what happens, right? Of course, if our consciousness arose from the cells of the nervous system at the beginning of life, when then the nervous system stops to function, at the end of life, then consciousness would also just stop. Right? And then if consciousness arose from a previous moment of consciousness at the beginning of life, then that process would continue through death. The stream of consciousness would go on. And then, of course, there's other options, other possibilities, maybe. I don't know. Imagine for yourself, take a few minutes looking at the continuum of consciousness into the future like that. Mm. So gradually come to a conclusion about that also. What you imagine will happen at the time of death for the stream of consciousness. Maybe while we're thinking about that, it's also good just to briefly reflect, like imagine what state of mind would I like to have at the time of death? You know, it's important to have a positive state of mind at the time of death because it helps greatly in transitioning to a future life. So also, if you think that that will happen, that kind of transition will happen, or even if you don't, you can just imagine. But what state of mind, what kind of attitude, or yeah, quality of mind would you like to have in the last moments of this life? Just reflect for a moment and practice. Okay, so you can relax your attention. Are there any questions? I kind of don't imagine so. Doesn't feel like any questions. Okay, then let's take a 6-minute break until 4:10. Okay, so let's come back to just being aware of our minds in the present moment. So the one topic I forgot to mention we meditated on earlier, so I'll meditate on it again briefly now, is our potential. The potential of our minds. So this builds on, the clear knowing nature of the mind, or that the mind is clear and knowing, and also the continuity of mind, especially into the future. Right? So the idea is that, if our minds are by nature clear, and their nature is, and their function is to know things, then doesn't that point to two different possibilities, right? On the one hand, if our minds are by nature clear,
then isn't it the case that whatever disturbing emotion or mental affliction that arises in our continuum, that it also is not fixed in our experience. It can also, just as it has arisen, it can also pass away. And no matter how strongly we're habituated to an afflictive state of mind, that's never fundamentally who we are, what we are as a person. Right? Just as no matter how many clouds appear in the sky, or how heavily the sky is obscured by clouds or smoke or dust, it's never of the nature of the sky. So reflect on that for a moment. Does the clear nature of the mind, is it a basis for saying that whatever obscures or disturbs sort of the natural peace of the mind is temporary, adventitious, and can be cleared away? So check, does that seem true or not to you? And why or why not? And then the next possibility, so this is the clear nature of the mind relates to the possibility of purifying, anything that obscures the clarity of the mind. Just like anything that contaminates water can be filtered out of water. Any dust that settles on a mirror can be cleared away, cleaned from the mirror. Anything that obscures the clear, spacious space of the sky is never of the nature of the sky. So then, secondly, is the possibility of knowing, right? So then the question here is like, to what degree or how much can we expand uh, the mind's ability to know things? In a way, like how much can the mind know? And not in terms of just like being aware of facts or figures or trivia, but in terms of like being aware of more of the world with greater clarity, subtlety, more accurately. more truthfully, more in touch with reality. So imagine, purifying the mind more and more, then how much, how much, to what limit can the mind's ability to know expand? To what ends? Kind of like the light of the sun, like our sun or any star. Like it's kind of like how far can its light travel? How much can it illuminate? But here, but I mean, it's a bit different though, because the light of a star, the sun, it's fixed. It can only create so much light. But here it's more like our mind, you know, how much light can it create in a way? Like how much can we increase the ability of the mind to know, or the mind's ability to know things? Can it be released from obscuration, purified, and then expand further and further? And closely related to that is, the idea of positive qualities of mind, like loving kindness, compassion, generosity. How much can those be expanded or developed? So reflect on that for a couple minutes. See what makes sense to you. Okay, so just come back to the neutral state, just observing the mind. So we'll switch gears now and meditate on anger for a bit. And then we'll take a break, meditate on attachment after the break. So just come back to observing the mind again in the present moment. Mm. So we'll first look at look at the definition of anger. Yeah, so remember, definition of anger is a mental factor that observes objects such as living beings, painful feelings, or inanimate things, and exclusively focuses on the negative aspects of those and exaggerates that negativity, and then gives rise to a harsh, tormented state of mind that contemplates harming those objects. So, one way to begin meditating on its anger is going through the definition and checking those different characteristics described one by one and seeing if they seem accurate or true of our experience of anger or not. So remember, whenever we meditate on a mental affliction, we can look at it in terms of, when we've experienced that mental affliction, like in anger, we've become angry. Or we can look at it in terms of, when another person's been angry at us, we've been the object of another person's anger. And then looking at, how did their anger look from that vantage point. And then we can also contemplate as, a third person observer of, being when we've been around one person is angry at another. And how did it look like that? But usually it's best to start with your own experience because we have the most insight. We can see that from the inside as opposed from the outside. So starting with our own experience. So first, just remember a time when you became angry, right? And again, start with a mild, obvious, but mild instance. Right? So first check what was the object? Was the object a living being, a painful feeling, like within yourself, or an inanimate thing? What was the object of that mind of anger? So then the rest is looking at how we kind of, well, not the rest, but the next 2 points, characteristics described, are looking at how we observe how the object appears to us, or how the mind focuses on the object. So the next is exclusively focuses on a negative aspect of the object. Right? So does that seem to be the case or not? That the mind of that what we recognize as a mind of anger, is it true? It seems to focus exclusively on just something negative, a drawback, a fault that we see in the object of our anger. And exclusively meaning like the fault stands out alone, and we don't kind of, that mind of anger doesn't see anything else. Kind of really doesn't see any especially doesn't see any positive quality. It's not a balanced view. It just sees the fault. It's almost like that appears to the exclusion of anything else. So does that seem to be the case? And then the next characteristic is closely related, and then exaggerates how bad that is, right? Exaggerates the negative aspect of whatever fault we see. Exaggerates that, makes it seem much worse, much bigger, much more intractable than it actually is. So check your experience. Does that seem to be the case? Anger exaggerates how bad something is. And then the next characteristic is more describing how it makes us feel, that mind of anger, that it's a harsh, tormented state of mind, right? That it makes us feel kind of disturbed. It's a harsh, it's a harsh quality of mind. And that it's tormented, that we feel very uncomfortable, unpleasant, disturbed, tormented, pained, or agitated by the mind of anger. So are those true? That it's a harsh state of mind, and it kind of torments our continuum. It's very disturbing in our mental continuum, maybe even in our body. And then finally, the last character is to describe is that it contemplates harming the object. Right? So it contemplates harming the object of anger, the mind of anger. So it focuses on the object, all these other characteristics, right? Focuses exclusively on a fault, exaggerates that, gives rise to a harsh and tormented state of mind, and then contemplates harming the object or pushing it away, destroying it, belittling, disparaging, all these different forms of harm. So does that seem to be the case in your own experience? Okay, so now briefly, just some antidotes to anger. So how do we reduce when we see anger, when we identify and see it arising? Or actually, it's important to practice the antidotes even before anger arises. And then when we first see it arising, to apply antidotes at that time, at that time, change the direction that our thoughts and energies are going. So a first antidote is just to kind of do the contemplation we just did, but like just reflecting on the faults of anger. Right. So some of the faults of anger are just what we reflect on. It's a tormented and harsh state of mind. Is a fault of anger, and that it's not in touch with reality. It exaggerates things, and that it's biased. It only focuses exclusively on faults. Doesn't have a balanced view. So just recognizing those different characteristics of anger and seeing how they're distorted and problematic and unpleasant. No? Like another of the major faults of anger is it causes us to feel unhappy. You know, at the moment you have anger in your continuum in your mind manifest, you can't really feel happy at the same time. So it destroys our happiness, also harms our relationships with others, can lead us into even violence, you know, very harmful behavior. Yeah, so reflect on some of these faults of anger or others for a couple of minutes and try to check, you know, by recognizing these faults more deeply, does that become something that reduces my anger or proclivity to become angry? And then finally, the most direct antidote to anger is loving kindness, is a mind of love. So just for a couple minutes, try, see if in relation to the, you know, independence upon the specific case of anger you're thinking about, if you can use love as an antidote, you know, recognizing that love is the mind. So why is love a direct antidote to anger? Because one facet of aspect of anger is it contemplates harming an object. And love is the exact opposite. Love contemplates benefiting an object, wishes for the well-being and benefit of something. So as we're harm, anger contemplates or wishes for harm. Love contemplates or wishes for benefit. So they can't exist in the mind at the same time with regard to the same object. So see if that works as an antidote in the situation you're thinking of. If you can generate a mind of loving kindness, focused on the object of the anger you're thinking of. So if you like, you can gradually relax your attention and take a 3-minute break. Mm-hmm. So we just have 10 minutes or so left. And yeah, so we'll meditate on attachment and the antidotes to attachment. So first, just yeah, focus your mind within once again. And then gradually bring to mind a clear example of attachment in your own experience. Yeah. So once again, then we'll look at the compare our own experience with the definition of attachment. So attachment, I mean, the main characteristics, they're very similar to anger, just on the opposite. Instead of focusing on something, a fault, focus on something pleasant, attractive that appears to us. Pleasant, yeah. Something that appears as a positive quality. So again, the definition is a mental factor that observes its object, a contaminated phenomena. So contaminated phenomena means something that has arisen or been produced by karma and mental afflictions. Yeah, but anyway, the object not so important, but identify the object of your own. The example of attachment or examples of attachment you're thinking of. Try to identify clearly what's the object that the mind focuses on. Yeah, attachment is a bit tricky because I mean, look at in terms of the objects. There can be like external object, a thing that we're attached to, but there's also kind of a feeling. Attachment always goes together with a pleasant feeling. And oftentimes, like that pleasant feeling itself is also an object of attachment. That's what we want, right? It's kind of like oftentimes we want an object so that we can feel that pleasant feeling that we feel by relating to or engaging with that object. So they seem like they both seem like objects of attachment. Isn't it? I don't know. Check. So identify the object of attachment, and then it says the definition, the object exaggerates its attractiveness. And you can add focuses exclusively. So does it seem like the attachment focuses exclusively on the pleasant aspects of the object we're attached to? And does it exaggerate how pleasant those are, how good those are, how attractive or enjoyable those are? Does it exaggerate the pleasantness of the objects of attachment. Also, something, um, oh yeah, well, maybe I should mention the final in the actual definition here is clings to. And then the mind of attachment clings to the object, right? There's a kind of longing, desire for, or wanting of the object that's sort of clingy. It's difficult to just stop thinking about, um, to like take the attention away from the object. This sort of magnetic attraction. Does that seem to be the case in the example in your experience, the example you're looking at? And then a final characteristic, we're just spending a short time on each of these because we don't have much time left. A final characteristic of attachment is, it's not really in the definition, but it seems to be the case that there's a kind of expectation, I don't know, almost like a subconscious expectation. The mind of attachment expects that the thing that we're attracted to, that it will kind of satisfy or bring some enjoyment sort of without end, like just open-endedly or permanently in a way, in a fundamental way, it will bring us enjoyment. Does that, I don't know, does that seem to be the case in your experience? That the mind of attachment doesn't recognize like the enjoyment is just very short-lived. Most things, it'll come to an end. Doesn't see that. Okay, so then let's meditate on some antidotes to attachments for a few minutes. So again, the first antidote is just recognizing the faults of attachment, right? So we can look at, in the definition we just looked at, how attachment kind of has this unrealistic expectation. Well, one, it's biased, right? It only looks at the positive side, doesn't look at the negatives. So it's kind of disconnected from reality in that way, distorts reality. And then because it exaggerates also, so distortion, distorted perception. And then it clings to, and it kind of has this unrealistic expectation that the objects of attachment will kind of give me satisfaction and happiness in any and in lasting way. So does that seem to be the case? And can we use the recognition of those faults of attachment to reduce attachment? Mhm. And then a final antidote, probably the main antidote to attachment, is because attachment focuses exclusively on pleasant aspects and exaggerates those, longs for those. Then the opposite, the opposite kind of mind is the mind that sees the faults, right? That sees and recognizes the faults or drawbacks of the object of our attachment, the limitations. It's kind of a sobering mind, right? So see if you can apply that antidote in your example you're looking at. Kind of generate a more balanced view of the object by looking at unpleasant aspects or drawbacks of the object. Mhm. Okay, so our time is up. So let's dedicate briefly. Yeah, rejoicing in all the effort oneself has made, all the other students in the course have made in this session and over the entire module of Discovering Buddhism, Mind and its Potential. So thinking all of this virtuous or all this merit gathered together, this positive energy gathered together, then we can dedicate that we ourselves and all other sentient beings have a deeper and deeper understanding of their own mind, and thereby gather, create or have more and more control over their own minds and their wisdom. Understanding what are the causes for suffering, what are the causes of happiness, becomes clearer and clearer, and thereby they can, reduce and eliminate causes of suffering and increase and maximize causes of well-being and happiness in their own lives and in the lives of others. So in short, may all sentient beings, all our kind mother sentient beings, who have been the source of all of our happiness from life to life, and they be free from every form of suffering and the cause of suffering, and have every form of well-being and happiness and the causes of those, recognizing that ourselves, other sentient beings, happiness and suffering are all dependently arising phenomena, empty of existing from their own side, and even the slightest atom. And we can also dedicate that in order to that our lives are the greatest benefit to ourselves and others. May we, actualize our own highest potential for wisdom, kindness, compassion, mental focus, generosity, perseverance, and so forth. And then bring to mind any other prayers or dedications you'd like to make. So may all those your virtuous intentions be accomplished in accordance with your wishes. And then also may, recognizing all the things we've been studying in this module all comes about through the kindness of Shakyamuni Buddha and all the lineage teachers, down to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and our other teachers. So may all of them, all those who are living, may they have long and stable lives. All those who have passed away, may they appear again in whatever forms most beneficial to sentient beings. All those who have recently died and passed away, I mean, just general, any sentient being who's died, is passed into the Barda, may they take a precious human rebirth, the rebirth of the Pure Land. And everywhere in the world, may there be peace and harmony. May all violence and wars be resolved through mediation. And all beings be healthy, free of illness of body and mind. And especially may the center hosting this event, Ocean of Compassion Buddhist Center, may it flourish in every way, be free of any obstacles, especially have the ongoing support of countless volunteers and benefactors supporting the center, sustaining the center. Okay, so that's it for this module, Mind and Its Potential, and the practice session today. So I'll just remind you on Tuesday, today's Sunday, right? So day after tomorrow. It'd be nice if we had a week break, but we don't. So I don't know. I think it didn't fit in the schedule somehow. So anyway, this coming Tuesday, we'll start the next module, How to Meditate, which goes for 4 weeks, 4-week session. And it will meet in person at Land of Medicine Buddha in SoCal, but it'll also be online. And then 2 weeks from today, right? August 23rd, then we'll have the next Dharma outdoor event at Lake Vasona. And it'll be especially for all your pets and animals you want to bring. So we'll be we'll set up a table with lots of holy objects like relics and other images and texts on a table, and then circumambulate, walk the animals around those to bless them, and then also recite mantras together and meditate together to bless the animals. So the first hour is like cats and birds and fish and things, and then the second hour is dogs, right? Because if we put dogs and cats together at the same time, it could be a mess, right? Yeah. It'll be our first time doing that, so it probably will be a mess, whatever we do. But it'll be fun too. So yeah, that's from what I think 9:30 to 11:30, Lake Vasona. So you can sign up via the website if you're interested. Okay, thank you all. Yeah, hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.